firstly, I'm not David, who you were expecting. He asked me to fill in last minute, so this is a bit rushed and put together, but I'm going to try and get as much done. I normally do PR for a lot of tech companies, and I'm involved with a few startups as well. So basically, he's asked me to talk a little bit about Dublin Startup Week, which Kim was involved in as well. So, the initial goals that were set in the last week of August were they wanted to do maybe around 25, 30 events. They maybe wanted around 1,000 people to attend them. The organisers of Startup Week and Techstars advise people to do this. Give yourselves around 10 months to organise your first citywide Startup Week. The lads and the organisers and the track captains did it in 10 weeks. They were told they were mental, but they did it, and they ended up getting 54 events together with 115 speakers, and I think it was, in the end, over 2,500 attendees over 5 days in Dublin there the week before last. So, in terms of putting that together, I put the thing down, I'm terrible. They're the lads, the co-organisers and founders of Dublin Startup Week. And I'm not going to give them that much credit, they're getting enough credit. I'm going to move on to the track captains. So as you can see, Kim and Catherine were both on the design track. There was Vicky for the developer track, Firkin for diversity inclusion, the very humble Colin Keogh, who was on Forbes 30 Under 30 for the future track, and Natalie, who is involved in tech.eu, was the Entrepreneur 101 track, so she was doing it from abroad and organised it from abroad. But really what I like to say about this event was, or my nickname for this event was, it was a really crowdsourced, community-led event. So there was of course bespoke events, which were events created for this week in particular, but a lot of the events as well were events that were already established in the ecosystem that took place, or they were negotiated to be like, oh, do you know why you have a monthly event on that particular subject? Why don't you have that event on during our week and come under the umbrella of Dublin Startup Week, which worked really well. A lot of big events got involved as well. Like there was a MediaCon event happening the week of the event, which was being hosted on Facebook and across the way in Marker. So they had phenomenal international guests come in to support Startup Week, and there was like after events. So it just all worked out really well, and the lads just did a phenomenal job, and the track captains. So that leads me to what I want to talk to you very briefly about tonight, since we don't have too much time. But I'm involved in PR for events, or PR for startups, tech companies, and I wanted to maybe give 9-10 tips. I can't remember how many tips it is because I just edited this before I came over. A few tips around doing a bit of PR for events, from small scale to large scale. I've been involved in quite a few. So, I'm Stacey. Nice to meet you all. That's my email, that's my Twitter, right crack. I'm an account manager for B2 PR, and I'm a curator for the Startup Digest Dublin, who I do with Liz McCarthy over in Dogpatch Labs, who's very involved in the ecosystem as well. Every Tuesday we send out a newsletter to your mail, annoying news maybe, about all the events taking place that week or in advance. We tend to focus on the free events, the meetup events, and then we twist the arms of those who have like the more conferencey events, being like, give us a discount for our readers. But it's a bit of promotion for the bigger events as well, which is great. So we work with the likes of Intercom, Currency Fair, DigiGames, who brought out Star Trek last week. That was a cool announcement on your mobile phone. Haven't downloaded it yet, don't tell me. Don't tell them. AQmetrics, Riot, Newswhip, Circle. That slide hasn't been updated in a while. But I also wanted to, so you can see my shoddy job of adding some of the events I had in last minute. Like Kim's like, I'm a designer, this is like ridiculous. What colour did you pick? Nasty yellow. So I've worked with the likes of Dublin Startup Week, Zero Day Con, Future Health Summit, and Techies for Dentistry, which is a great event for all tech companies or organisations around Dublin to get involved with. It's like a what's it? Not a mystery tour. A mad treasure hunt around Dublin City for charity. So let's start. Resist the temptation to talk about yourselves if you're hosting an event. You're not interesting. You aren't. It's what's happening at your event that's interesting. Don't go in being like, you need to talk about my event, you need to do this, you need to do that. the attendees, what's happening, what impact an event like this is going to have on your sector is what's interesting. And another thing is, don't talk about where your event is now. And that was very particular about David and Jean when they were doing Startup Week, was we don't want to talk about, like, of course they had like their goals that they're always constantly talking about goals, but they also were very, they really wanted to emphasise that this event has a 3-year arc. They're like, we want to do this event in Dublin now, but we want to do this for at least 3 years and really take this off the ground. So they had their initial goals, they blasted them through the roof, so I don't know what their next goals are going to be. God help us. So yeah, if you're going to talk about your event, tell us the story arc. Tell them where it's come from, how he's got the idea, why it was needed in the sector particularly, and where it's going to go. Where can you see this event going? Like, you've probably had your own aspirations when you first said it. It wasn't just like, oh, we just want to do this one-off event. You kind of have to think about it. Like, if I do this, what does it mean? And that's the most interesting part of it, is like, what does security and development and like what everybody's going to do, security com, where did you want to, what voice did you want to create for the sector? Who did you want to give a platform to talk to? And that's what's more interesting about events and doing PR for them. We're not going to send out a press release being like, this is a great event. Like, it doesn't have any substance to it. So, like I said, make the story more than about yourselves. So, who and what is happening at your event is what's going to pique the journalist's interest. So, the likes of the coverage that Startup Week got about the event, I wanted to give a few examples, was the likes of Izzy Wheels. So they promoted, through their own PR company, they promoted that they were going to be attending and taking part in the Startability event for entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs with disabilities. And similarly to Girl Crew teaming up with Dell to promote that event. So I guess when you're doing PR for events, you kind of have to explain to them the story's not always going to be about you. You're not always going to get one article dedicated to what's going to happen at that your event is happening. You have to demonstrate who's going to be attending, what's going to be happening at your event. And you might have to be happy with just like a little mention that this is taking place at Startup Week. It's not always going to be all about Startup Week. And I'm sure like the speaker is getting the interviews and then John is speaking at DevSecCon. You know, you have to sometimes be accepting of a little mention, but it brings gravitas to your event that this is the kind of quality that's going to take place at it. Press releases, I love them and loathe them. So our agency is of course we do a press release to get press release done. It's a nice thing for a journalist to have to hand about the facts of the conference, but really a PR's job is to really sell the conference to them, what's happening at it. But it's a necessary evil. Press releases, they're a fact sheet at the end of the day about when it's on. It's the who, what, why, where and when of the event, and then you pack it full of the dreaded sponsors and their quotes that they need to be inserted into them, being like, please give them a bit of just please mention my sponsor, they'll really appreciate it, they're paying me enough to throw this event. So and the likes, like, they'll appreciate it as well, and mention they're happy to be involved in the community as well. But yeah, press releases, they really are for two things. They're a fact sheet, and to give the sponsor mention, let them have a chance to say what their quote is and how they're involved in it. But really you should be able to sell your event without having to do a press release, which is either your PR's job or your personal passion, whether it's over Twitter DM with a journalist that has a particular interest in security and tech or startability or design. You should, it's our job as well to know who those journalists are. But if you don't have the budget for a PR company and you want to get the word out about your meetup, look at the pool of journalists, or you probably already follow them on Twitter or other mediums, and you're like, I'll give them a follow, get them a DM or tweet at them being like, I have an event that you might be interested in. It's all, journalists really appreciate individuals reaching out to them as well, not just the hired guys. Yes, talk early, openly, and often. Back to the kind of story arc of Startup Week, they had a plan. I told them, of course, the announcement of such an event is going to get good coverage. It's the in-between and what everyone brings to the table that continues the conversation up to the event, which is probably the hardest part. because then at the end there's obviously interesting people in town that might pique the interest of the journalists as well. So the likes of the announcements for events, it's kind of hard. It's a bit of a hard one because obviously you have to bring attention to the event at the start and announce it, and then create all the stories in between. And this is where the likes of social media and stuff comes. This is where the likes of social media comes in as well. I'm getting too casual. I'm leaving. This is where social media comes in, helps the flow of conversation to smaller individuals and smaller groups of people rather than the press and how open that is. But yeah, there's lots of avenues to get the conversation going about a particular event. So this brings me on to content. So I think in terms, I really want to focus on paid at the moment. Because obviously we know it's shared and obviously PR being earned media. But I think the trend that I've seen a lot in terms of PR and promoting an event is a lot of it's paid for now, and you still have to be aware of it. I do want to give the warnings. If the media are aware that there is money in conferencing and events, and if they feel like either getting a profit from it or in terms of some sort of money, there's advertorials. They'd be like, oh, you've pitched them your conference idea, here's the sales department, and then that's kind of a brick wall. So there is maybe a mix of advertorial and editorial deals that you can strike with them, that maybe there's an ad that you can tell all the details that you need told in an ad in a newspaper or a magazine, and then they might offer you an editorial to talk about a bit more personally about the growth and the story arc of your conference or event. In terms of paid in another way, for smaller events and meetups, maybe you do have to put a bit of spend in advertising on social media. It's a bit of a necessary evil. Like if you want to get the word out to particular audiences, create that ad, put a tenner a day behind it. It's unfortunately you do have to put a personal spend behind it. And that's why I said just particularly for events nowadays, like working for Event PR for the last 3 years. The first year I could kind of start seeing it, and it's just even more so now. Just you need a bit more money for it. The bigger your conference gets, the more the kind of media sees opportunities there, and they have a business to run as well at the end of the day. And similar to your guys' point, if you can't put it on a t-shirt, if you can't make it snappy, memorable, tangible, make your conference feel like that. We love a bit of startup swag, as they say. Just try and make I had a bit of a better example in terms of conferencing. So my boss worked for Havoc, and they were able to basically tell the story of their company on the back of a t-shirt, which would have taken them 5 seconds to pitch, like a 10-second pitch on it. So that basically there is showing the dates and what's going on in Startup Week happening in Dublin. But it's just, like I said, all kind of guests loves a bit tangible, like something to take away from a conference. And I think that brings me on to it doesn't bring me on to the next point, but I'll move on to the next point. A meta party beats a party. And I thought it was funny that you had your little caravan thing too, because we had the little caravan RV too. So another thing that we kind of advise, so if there's a big conference kind of taking place, and you probably see this at like conferences in the cities and stuff, conferences can be a lot happening on them, and so if you have a select group of people that you really need to get in front of, because conferencing is networking at the end of the day, so you need to meet certain people to get business leads, etc., contacts, investors. So sometimes it involves being a bit creative and going to the conferences and doing the usual stuff, and then go as a sponsor of a conference or someone that is in a booth rather than an attendee, but attendees as well. Having a meta party or a satellite party, which we've done quite a bit, which works really well. You get the people that you want at an event to come to your party afterwards or during the lunch break, which all conferences have, and it gets you in front of the people that you need to see. In terms of smaller meetup groups, I think if you've built the brand of your meetup enough, you can hack a larger conference for a particular subject and maybe have an offsite. Don't tell the So, my last point, people remember how you make them feel, not what you say in terms of PR and in general, and how people come away from events, the positive light that happens, or just the positivity from an event. I think I've been to one or two conferences that there's been complaints, and it's not a nice feeling. There are meetups, and then there's been spectacular successes for events. But I think and in terms of PR, when you're reaching out to people and you have a meetup or an event that you're particularly passionate about, I think a journalist or someone that is able to promote your event, like an influencer or some particular interest in that sector that's to do with your meetup, that you want them to promote your interview or promote your event, and if you make them feel as passionate about your event as you are, then you're onto a winner. Any questions, if we have time?
I've got a question about the press releases.
Yes.
So, to be perfectly honest, we've done it the first year and it was just a dead cost.
Yes.
There's absolutely nothing coming out. What can be done better? Because what we end up, so we've got now, I don't know if you know Tech Beacon, so the managing director over there, we communicated, and now he's sending some journalists ahead of our conferences every time. And we don't do anything. We don't promote them, we don't retweet them, we don't give them some money. Why can't PR agency be a bit more like this? Rather than because the press release is just a dead end.
It's static.
It's just not doing anything, and it still costs you about $1,000 to publish.
Yeah. I suppose I have one to hand. You know, I always have a press release to hand with the information, because sponsors usually need some sort of say in a press release. If they're a major gold sponsor, they'll need their word in somewhere for the announcement of the conference, unless they're already established as a sponsor. So you need that to hand for journalists, just when you're giving them a pitch, here's just a fact sheet. You know, it's just a nice to have for a journalist to have on hand, we always find. You have to make the journalist's job easy, easier. You don't want them going onto a website or just a link to a website where they find the language is all about a certain event, where they need unbiased information on a particular event to reference when they might need particular information.
Okay.
It's always just a nice to have. Is it necessary? Yes and no. I'd never send out just a press release. I give an introduction. This is the information. This is this is that. And here's a press release if you need it.
Okay, so a sponsor pack with a press release
Yeah.
So you see some companies have like a press kit.
Yeah.
So you go to the About Us page, whatever, it's a press kit. Should you do that for conferences?
Yes.
As well? What should be in?
You should have logos, press release, photos of the founders of the event, any resources from the event, like the booklets, the event layout, the event booklet.
So that's just like a zip file. It's got everything.
All the information that someone could possibly need for the event in terms of information. What would you say?
I just have another. Sorry. So you mentioned earlier that approaching bloggers and journalists to come to your event. So
I didn't really go on that, and that's another point. Well, continue your question. Sorry.
So I do that a lot as well, but I always have a really, really low return rate. Like most of them are not really interested. Do you have any tips on how you could make them interested?
Don't make them interested. Sometimes I think it's a lot of, like I said, a low return to get journalists to actually attend your event. I think if just people already attending your event, it's a success. I know you want people to talk about it, but what's worked for myself is to give the journalists exclusives before the event that this person's going to be speaking at your event. Like, here's a pre-interview, because you really want to ram ticket sales rather than the after fact. I always find the interviews that happen at the event are more promotion for next year rather than the year it's happening. But in terms of journalist attendance, it's really hard nowadays. They have so many event invitations. They have to really be particular about what they attend nowadays, if it's of value to what they're going to write. where I find if you set them up an interview beforehand with someone that they're interested in, and that'll maybe be like, they could be like, oh well, I don't need to attend now, but at least you've gotten possibly a bit of content, or make that like segue into introducing them to someone that they've admired in that particular sector or they want to talk to. Like if you're bringing them to town, like they'll really appreciate that you've linked them up with that speaker rather than journalist attendance. I've had like for a conference of, how many people were at it? Maybe 2,500 people at it. I had around, now in a very particular sector, around 10-15 journalists say they wanted to attend, 7 turned up, and it's kind of like that with conference attendance. If it's free events, like it's around 50%. But the journalists, I find, they're really busy, and I feel if you give them something what they need in advance, they'll be really appreciative of it. And if they want to attend, that's all the better. But you can't expect a journalist to write something about it, and I'd never give them, have that pressure on a journalist, because a lot of people think, here's a free ticket, you have to write about my event now, and that's the wrong way to do PR. Like I seen someone tweet about today about what's the difference between a chat with a journalist and an interview with a journalist. You know, the journalist is like, a chat is off the record, I can chat to them, I can have a coffee with them, you know. An interview is sit down, the PR might be in the corner taking notes of what's being said, guaranteed kind of coverage, where at least a chat with a journalist is a more informal setting, and you can't, journalists doesn't have to worry that if you make the introduction, or that you can pin your hopes and dreams on journalist attendance and interview being written about your gig or your conference, but you'll create a bad relationship, a toxic relationship there with journalists then, if you expect coverage.
So, first of all, kudos and Startup Week.
Well, not myself at all.
No, I mean, I attended one of the events, and it was amazing. It was the female immigrants.
The what?
The female immigrants with Startup Digest.
Yeah.
I was one of the mentors at that event, and the event itself was incredible. The amount of attendees, female immigrants with ideas, was mind-blowing. And the ideas they had were even more mind-blowing. But I mean, coming back to PR for those events, though, that was one event on one day of an incredible week. That was done by you, David, and so many others. So coming back to PR.
How did you reach that?
10 weeks that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Such a niche, so many niche markets, so many niche areas. How did you do all that in 10 weeks?
I'm not taking any credit. Basically, when it comes to the likes of what that event was, it was very community driven and crowdsource driven. That a lot of the event organisers that were contacted by the likes of Kim already knew their target market. They knew the watering holes and the places and the groups and the Facebook groups and the WhatsApp groups that they would be on, and they'd read about this particular event. So in terms of pure, very broad outreach, I think I was more so involved with. Funny thing though, I was giving out to Jean and David up until probably the last week of Startup Week that they hadn't created a Facebook page for Startup Week because they couldn't put all the events. Typical. Oh no, we're on Twitter, we're around. But yeah, when it comes to very niche things, and you might have heard of like micro-influencers now, people that have 1,000 followers on Instagram being recruited by brands because they're not over 20,000 or 50,000 followers that have like hashtag ad. It's people that are genuinely interested in the product and they can capture a voice or an interest. But
so network is a huge element as well, and for multi-event events, kind of like startup. So
yeah,
networks is a huge element.
The networks, the web, that it was really a web that kind of drove that event.
That comes back to your local presence as well, contacting local people, getting them to help you organising those events as well. Yeah.
We've got a funny one on Instagram, so I've got twin daughters of 14 and they're on Instagram and they've got so many followers, I couldn't believe that. And they actually just, now they just like all our pictures and everything from our company. But we haven't got an Instagram account for this person, so I can't from our company just say, oh, I like a picture of you, little 14-year-old girl. That's a bit twisted, isn't it? But yeah, there is those micro-influencers that help you without you doing anything.
Yeah. And if you think about how small the community is here, we all get to know each other. Like we're all at the same events, don't we? In your office 2 days ago, and we was like, "Oh, you." Yeah. So it's we always say like it's the watering holes. You know, it's who's at them, who's in them, who kind of not controls them, but like is
In
a
Ireland, who meets each other in the pub afterwards.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. The pub is key networking destination in Dublin.
The point is we build up networks for resiliency, so that naturally we try to mesh together to build up these kind of networks to help or to progress. So there's a natural inclination to try and make those connections that we all try to benefit from. So it's a two-way street.
Yes, I was just thinking of the Open Security Summit, which is another one we run, and Lisa for the last 2 years saying, we just don't do that. There's nothing, there's no money. It's basically we spend 9 days working from 8 in the morning till 2 in the morning, and people actually pay to come to our event to work on a problem that we can actually resell afterwards. Don't ask me how that works, but it's working. And it's just like, we're always having those conversations, but we need to do it to give it back to the community, and this is going to circle back to it. So exactly as you said, but it's a lot of effort.